I am staring at something that should be impossible in America. A federal judge just held Trump administration officials in contempt of court, not threatened, not warned, actually held them in contempt. And here's what terrifies me about why this is happening right now. Look, I just finished reading through hundreds of comments on this story, and I need to tell you what I found, because it reveals something way bigger than one judge's ruling. This is about whether we still have a country where laws mean anything at all. Let me start with what actually happened, because the details matter here. Federal Judge Patrick Schiltz in Minnesota didn't just wake up one morning and decide to go after the Trump administration. This judge was forced into this position after Immigration and Customs Enforcement defied over 100 court orders. 100. Let that sink in for a second. Here is the specific incident that pushed this over the edge. ICE conducted a raid, they arrested people, and when those people were brought before the court, ICE refused to provide them with bail hearings. Just refused. The judge ordered them to do it. ICE said no. The judge ordered again. ICE ignored him over and over and over, and then someone died. Alex Pretti, a nurse at a Veterans Affairs hospital. From what I am seeing, this man spent his career taking care of the worst cases. The veterans who came back from war broken in body and mind, the ones who've been lying in the same bed for a decade with no visitors and no hope. And IC showed up at his workplace and took him. No bail hearing, no due process. And now he is dead. I want you to understand something about the VA system, because one of the comments I read really stuck with me. Someone who did a rotation at the VA in San Francisco, one of the best facilities, described it as the stuff of nightmares. These patients are the least of us, and Alex Pretti voluntarily ministered to them with care and compassion. That S who IC targeted. Now, I'm not going to tell you that every single person ICE arrests is a saint. That would be dishonest. But I am going to tell you that in America, even people accused of crimes get due process. That S, not my opinion, that S, the Constitution. And when federal agents start ignoring federal judges, we not in America anymore. Here, S, what Judge Schiltz said, and I'm paraphrasing because I want you to hear the anger in these words. He said that IC officials will be held in contempt for defying his orders. He specifically named Todd Lyons, the acting head of ICE. And he made it clear this wasn't a suggestion or a warning. This was a legal finding of contempt. But here, S, where it gets disturbing. About 60% of the comments I read expressed the same exact sentiment. And I think they're right. They're saying nothing will happen. Judges will issue rulings. ICE will ignore them. The administration will keep doing whatever it wants. And there will be no consequences. One person wrote, "They have violated or ignored over 100 judicial orders in the last year. The Supreme Court told them to unmask DHS months ago. Why should civilians comply with a rogue force?" And that question is haunting me because they are right to ask it. If the president doesn't have to follow court orders, if ICE doesn't have to follow court orders, if the entire executive branch can just decide that judicial rulings don't apply to them, then why should anyone else follow the law? What's the point of having laws at all? And before anyone jumps down my throat saying I am being dramatic, let me steelman the opposition argument here because I think it is important. The strongest case for what the administration is doing goes something like this. We have a massive illegal immigration problem. The courts have been obstructing immigration enforcement for years with activist rulings. The president has the constitutional authority to enforce immigration law, and these judges are interfering with national security. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. I get that argument. I understand why it resonates with people who are genuinely concerned about border security, but here's why I think it is dead wrong. The Constitution doesn't say the president has to follow court orders except when it is inconvenient. It doesn't say due process applies to everyone except immigrants. And it sure as hell doesn't say that federal agents can kill someone in custody and then refuse to answer questions about it, because that's what happened here. Alex Pretti died, and when the judge demanded answers, ICE officials didn't show up. They just ignored the court. Let me tell you what I found in the comments that I think is the most important insight nobody is talking about. About 15% of comments came from people outside the United States, Australians, Germans, people watching America from a distance. And you know what they re-saying? They re-watching in horror as America descends into lawlessness. One German commenter wrote, "I am German." Following these political videos here daily, hearings, lawyers, convicted felons, but never anything happens. There's something terribly wrong with you, USA. And here's what breaks my heart about that comment. They rewrite. From the outside, we look insane. We have a system where the president was convicted of 34 felonies and nothing happened, where he was found liable for sexual assault and didn't pay and nothing happened, where he openly defies court orders and nothing happens. So when IC defies a judge, why would we expect anything different? But I want to push back on the fatalism for a minute because I think it's dangerous. About 20% of the comments were completely giving up, saying nothing matters, wake me when it's over, enjoy your life while it lasts in Trumpistan. And I understand that exhaustion. I feel it too. But here's what I believe, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think I am. The moment we accept that laws don't matter is the moment we've actually lost. As long as judges like Patrick Schiltz are willing to issue contempt rulings, as long as there are people willing to stand up and say this is wrong, we still have a chance. Now let me connect some dots that I haven't seen anyone else making, because this goes way deeper than one ICE raid. The Trump administration is systematically attacking every institution that could check its power. The courts, the press, the intelligence agencies, Congress, and they redoing it in a way that's actually pretty brilliant from a strategic standpoint, even though it's terrifying from a constitutional one. Here's the pattern. They do something outrageous. Courts issue an order to stop. They ignore the order. Courts hold them in contempt. They ignore that too. And they re-betting that eventually people will just get exhausted and accept it. One commenter made a comparison to the Nazis, and normally I'd say that S over the top, but they said something that made me think. They wrote, words didn't to stop the Nazis, guns did. Get your Second Amendment right before it is too late. Now, I am not advocating violence. Let me be absolutely clear about that. Violence is not the answer here, and anyone who engages in political violence is wrong. But I think the underlying point is important. There comes a point where authoritarianism can be stopped with legal rulings alone. It requires resistance. And that resistance can take a lot of forms. It can mean governors refusing to cooperate with federal immigration raids. It can mean judges continuing to issue rulings even when they were ignored. It can mean citizens showing up to protest. It can mean journalists continuing to cover these stories. It can mean you and me refusing to normalize what's happening. Let me tell you about something else I found in the comments that I think reveals the emotional core of this moment. Multiple people talked about impeachment. They re-saying Trump committed treason by sharing national security secrets in exchange for money to his businesses. They re-saying even Republicans are joining Democrats to file articles of impeachment. Whistleblowers and military officials meeting in a secure facility. I haven't been able to independently verify those claims, so I'm not going to state them as fact. But the fact that people believe this is happening tells you something important about where we are as a country. There's a growing sense that we are in a constitutional crisis and that normal political processes aren't sufficient to address it. Here's what I know for certain. The Trump administration is openly defying federal courts. ICE is conducting raids without providing due process. People are dying in custody, and judges are fighting back. The question is whether those judges have any actual power or whether we've reached the point where court rulings are just pieces of paper that the executive branch can ignore. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. If the executive branch can ignore the courts, then we don't have three branches of government anymore. We have one branch with all the power and two other branches that make suggestions. That's not a constitutional republic. That's not democracy. That is something else entirely. Now, several commenters pointed out something that I think is strategically crucial. They asked why Trump is doing this now. Why the aggressive ICE raids? Why the open defiance of courts? Why the chaos? And one answer that came up multiple times is distraction. The Epstein files, Trump's name all over them, allegations of child sex trafficking, and every time those stories start to gain traction, Trump does something explosive to change the subject, bomb another country, threaten to invade Greenland, unleash ICE on American cities. I can prove that is the strategy, but the pattern is undeniable. Every time Trump faces serious legal jeopardy, he creates a bigger crisis to distract from it. But here's what I think people are missing. Even if it's a distraction, the thing he is using as a distraction is real. ICE really is defying courts. People really are dying. The constitutional crisis really is happening. You can distract from one crime by committing another crime and expect everyone to forget about both. Let me talk about what Judge Schiltz can actually do here, because I think this is important context. Finding someone in contempt of court is serious. It can mean fines. It can mean jail time. But here's the catch. The judge needs someone to enforce the ruling. Normally, that would be the Department of Justice. But the Department of Justice works for the Trump administration. So the judge can issue all the contempt rulings he wants, but if DOJ refuses to prosecute, nothing happens. Multiple commenters pointed this out. Contempt is pointless if DOJ won to charge. Why pretend it means anything? And I think they rewrite to be cynical about this. We've seen this pattern before. Judge issues ruling. Administration ignores it. Nothing happens. Repeat. But here's where I want to push back again. The fact that the system is broken doesn't mean we should stop using it. Every time a judge issues a ruling against the Trump administration, it creates a record. It establishes that what they are doing is illegal. And even if there are no immediate consequences, those rulings matter for history. When we look back at this period, we are going to ask who stood up and who went along. Judge Patrick Schiltz is creating a record that says he stood up. That matters. Now let me address something that about 10% of commenters brought up because I think it's important. Several people said that both the left and right understand what principles this country was founded on, but those people aren't running the federal government right now. MAGA is anti-American. I want to be careful here because I think it's too easy to paint everyone who supports Trump with the same brush. There are people who voted for Trump because they are genuinely concerned about immigration or because they don't trust the establishment or because they wanted change. Those people aren't necessarily anti-American. But I do think MAGA as a movement, as it has currently constituted, has abandoned core American principles. The rule of law, checks and balances, due process, equal protection under the law. When you openly defying federal courts and targeting people based on their ethnicity, you've left American values behind. And I think that's the tragedy of this moment. A lot of people who consider themselves patriots are supporting a movement that's fundamentally authoritarian. Let me tell you about the most heartbreaking comment I read. It was from someone talking about Alex Pretti, the nurse who died. They said people would mourn for him even more if they knew what it takes to be a superlative nurse in the VA system. They describe patients who have been in the same bed for a decade or more, unable to move or speak, with no visitors and no hope. And Alex Pretti voluntarily ministered to the least of these with care and compassion. That S who ICE took, that S who died in their custody, and that S who the Trump administration is refusing to be held accountable for. You know what really gets me about this? The Trump administration campaigned on law and order. They said they were going to be tough on crime. They said they were going to restore respect for law enforcement. But when law enforcement means ICE agents defying federal judges, when law and order means people dying in custody without due process, that S, not law and order. That S, lawlessness. Here's my prediction, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. Judge Schiltz is going to issue his contempt ruling. ICE officials are going to ignore it. The Department of Justice is going to refuse to prosecute, and nothing will happen. But that doesn't mean this fight is over. It means it's going to escalate. Governors in blue states are going to start refusing to cooperate with ICE. More judges are going to start issuing contempt rulings. More resistance is going to build, and at some point, something is going to break. I don't know what that breaking point looks like. Maybe it's mass protests. Maybe it is a constitutional crisis that even Trump can ignore. Maybe it is the midterm elections. Maybe it is something we can predict yet. But I believe the American people still care about the rule of law. I believe there are still enough people who understand that a country where the president can ignore courts isn't a country we want to live in. Now, let me talk about what we can actually do about this, because I think actionable steps are important. First, if you live in Minnesota or any state where ICE is conducting these raids, contact your governor and demand that state resources not be used to support federal immigration enforcement that violates court orders. Governors have power here, and they need to use it. Second, if you have a representative in Congress, call them. Tell them you want articles of impeachment filed for defying federal court orders. Tell them you want investigations. Tell them you want accountability. Make noise. Third, support organizations that are providing legal representation to people detained by ICE. The ACLU, immigration advocacy groups, public defender offices, these organizations are on the front lines of this fight, and they need resources. Fourth, show up to protests if you can. Make your voice heard. The administration is counting on people being too exhausted to fight back. Prove them wrong. Fifth, and this is maybe the most important, don't normalize this. Don't accept that this is just how things are now. Every time someone says nothing will happen, push back. Say not if we don't let it. Keep the outrage alive. Keep the pressure on. Sixth, vote. In every election, local, state, federal, midterms are coming. If Democrats take back Congress, they can actually hold this administration accountable. If they don't, this gets worse. And seventh, take care of your mental health. I know this is exhausting. I know it feels overwhelming. But we can fight if we burned out. Find community. Find people who share your values. Support each other. Look, I want to end on something that I think is important to say. I am scared. I am genuinely frightened by what I am seeing happen to this country. When federal agents can defy federal judges with impunity, when people die in custody and there are no consequences, when the Constitution becomes toilet paper, we are in uncharted territory. But I am also hopeful, and maybe that makes me naive, but I don't care. I am hopeful because Judge Schiltz exists. I am hopeful because hundreds of thousands of people are commenting on videos like this, expressing outrage, refusing to accept this as normal. I am hopeful because every authoritarian regime in history has eventually fallen, usually because regular people stood up and said enough. Steve Bannon said something that I think is revealing. He said, if we lose the midterms, if we lose 2028, some in this room are going to prison, myself included. They know what they are doing is illegal. They know they are vulnerable if they lose power. That's why they are fighting so hard to consolidate control. That's why they were defying courts and attacking institutions. But their desperation is also our opportunity. They wouldn't be working this hard if they weren't afraid. So here's what I believe. We in the fight of our lives for the soul of this country. Judges like Patrick Schiltz are doing their part. Nurses like Alex Pretti did their part. Now it's our turn. Don't let them exhaust you into submission. Don't accept that laws don't matter. Don't normalize tyranny. Fight back with every legal tool we have. Use your voice. Use your vote. Use your power as a citizen. And remember this, we are the majority. Most Americans don't want to live in a country where federal agents can defy courts and kill people without consequences. Most Americans still believe in the Constitution. Most Americans still believe in the rule of law. We just have to act like it. I am going to keep covering this story. I am going to keep holding people accountable. I am going to keep speaking truth even when it's so uncomfortable. And I hope you'll join me, because if we don't stand up now, when will we? If we don't fight back now, when will we? If we don't defend the Constitution now, when will we? The answer is never. This is the moment. This is the fight. And I, for one, am not giving up. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for refusing to accept this as normal. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Tell me if you agree or disagree. Tell me what you're going to do about this. Let's build a community of people who still believe America can be better than this. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you are feeling like nothing matters, I want you to hear this. You matter. Your voice matters. Your vote matters. Your resistance matters. Don't let them convince you otherwise. We've got work to do.